Sige. Good morning, classmates. Our group represents Republic Act number 9147, known as the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act. It is an act providing for the conservation and protection of wildlife resources and their habitats, appropriating funds and therefore and for other purposes. Next slide. And RA number 9147 is a measure that provided the necessary environmental policy enabling Philippine government to manage and conserve the wildlife resources of the country comprehensively. RA 9147 included a list of illegal acts that are considered detrimental to wildlife with corresponding penalties such as imprisonment or fines or both that are intended to serve as deterrent for violative acts against wildlife and their habitats. In sum, RA 9147 provided the support, mechanism, and facilities for wildlife management and wildlife policy implementation. It is implemented in July 30, 2001, and the principal author of RA 9147 is Juan Miguel Zubiri. The reason of the declaration of this policy is to conserve and protect wildlife species and their habitats to promote ecological balance and enhance biological diversity, and to regulate the collection and trade The declaration of this policy is to conserve and protect wildlife species and their habitats to promote ecological balance and enhance biological diversity, and to regulate the collection and trade of wildlife. Also, to pursue with due regard to the national interest, the Philippine commitment to international conventions, protection of wildlife and their habitats. And lastly, to initiate or support scientific studies on the conservation of biological diversity. It also recognizes the jurisdiction of the following: the DENR, or Department of Environment and Natural Resources, have the jurisdiction over the following: terrestrial plants, terrestrial animals, marine turtles and tortoise and dugong. On the other hand, Department of Agriculture have the jurisdiction of the following: declared aquatic critical habitats, fishes, aquatic plants and vertebrates, marine animals, and except dugong. Lastly, the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development have the jurisdiction of wildlife in the province of Palawan pursuant to RA 7611, known as the Strategic Environmental Plan for Palawan. And the other slides will be discussed by my other group members.
Objectives of this law says that is to conserve and protect wildlife species and their habitats to promote ecological balance and enhance biological diversity, to regulate the collection and trade wildlife, to pursue with regard to the national interest, the Philippine commitment to international conventions, protection of wildlife and habitats, to initiate or support scientific studies on the conservation of biological diversity. And we have the scope of application. It says that it enforceable for all wildlife species found in all areas of the country, including protected areas under RA 7586, otherwise known as National Integrated Protected Areas System Act, and critical habitat. It says that is to ensure the protection of wildlife, birds, and plants. This declares certain areas such as a sanctuary or a national park, wildlife hunting bans, and brings punishment for their violation. And by through this law, it protects our most at-risk plants and animals which are on the verge of extinction. Next is the prohibited acts. So under this RA, it has a certain acts that provides a framework to protect endangered and threatened species and punishes those acts that are defined in this RA. And some of those acts, particularly in this RA, will be discussed in the preceding slide.
Um, Killing and destroying wildlife species except in the following instances. Number one, when it is done as part of the religious rituals of established tribal groups or indigenous cultural communities. What we mean by this is that there are certain communities wherein in order to, because they have ritual practices and their spiritual belief, they would sacrifice wild animals in order to appease their gods. For example, here in the Igorot belief, we have what we call Kabunyan, or the god in their own religion or spiritual belief. They would sacrifice wild animals in order to please or in order to ask for example good harvest. Next. Number two, when wildlife is afflicted with an incurable communicable disease. When we say communicable disease, these are types of diseases that can spread. It would start from animal to human and then human to human interaction. There are instances wherein there is a killing of wild species which carries diseases in order to prevent the spread. Next, when it is done to prevent an imminent danger to the life or limb of human being. These are instances where usually it would be in the form of self-defense, especially to people who visit forests where they can meet a variety of dangerous wild animals. Next, when the wildlife is killed or destroyed after it has been used in authorized research or experiments. A good example of this is taxidermy, wherein it is the art of preserving an animal's body via mounting or stuffing for the purpose of display or study. Next. Effecting any of the following acts in critical habitats. Dumping of waste products detrimental to wildlife. As we all know, waste can be a very big problem to wildlife, especially when there are animals who ingest waste products. It can poison their natural habitats. Next is squatting or otherwise occupying any portion of the critical habitat. There are people who would build their houses or huts in protected natural areas, and that is illegal. Next is mineral explorations and or extractions, wherein there are this has a very big impact on the natural habitat of animals because of huge excavations and for purposes of exploration or extraction. Next is burning, logging, and quarrying. For burning, there are practices that are allowed, such as what we call kaingin, if I'm not mistaken. But burning for the purpose of for just creating a space for whatever purpose it may serve is illegal. And there is illegal logging, where it is prohibited to cut down trees which can affect the natural habitat of wildlife species. And quarrying. Quarrying is for the purpose of gathering minerals for construction purposes. Next. Lastly, reintroduction or restocking of wildlife resources. Trading of wildlife. collecting, hunting, or possessing wildlife, their byproducts and derivative, gathering or destroying of active nest trees, host plants, and the like, maltreating and or inflicting other injuries not covered by the preceding paragraph, and transportation of wildlife. So in general, this is the illegal collection, hunting of wildlife, and then transporting them or exporting them to, for example, other countries for the purpose of selling or trading. Yun lang po. Next reporter.
On detail niya. Sige, siya kon. So, here are the fines and penalties for killing and destroying wildlife. Critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened other wildlife species has a punishment of imprisonment from 6 months to 12 years with a fine of ranging from 10,000 pesos to 1 million pesos. Next slide. For inflicting injury which cripples and or impairs the reproductive system. Critically endangered. For the critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened other wildlife species has imprisonment from 1 month to 6 years with a fine of 5,000 pesos to 500,000 pesos.
So next is affecting acts, dumping waste, squatting, mineral exploration, burning, logging, and quarrying. Imprisonment of 1 month to 8 years with a fine ranging of 5,000 to 5 million. So one of the major impacts of waste pollution is on our wildlife. When animals, birds, and sea creatures ingest waste, the plastics and other chemicals can harm their health. They can also swallow damaging debris, such as discarded fishing hooks, and die in discarded fishing nets. Cigarettes butts, which can be toxic to fish and birds, can remain in grassland and sand dunes for many years. Next is trading of wildlife, critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened, and other wildlife species. Imprisonment from 10 days to 4 years with a fine ranging from 200,000 to 300,000 pesos. So trade, which means the act of engaging the exchange, exportation, or importation, purchase or sale of wildlife, their derivatives or byproducts, locally or internationally. So illegal wildlife trade is driven by high profit margins and in many cases, the high prices paid for rare species. Vulnerable wild animals are pushed further to the edge of extinction when nature can't replenish their stocks to keep up with the rate of human consumption. Next. Collecting, hunting, or possessing, gathering, or destroying of activeness, critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened, or other wildlife species, with the imprisonment from 10 days to 4 years, with a fine ranging from 1,000 pesos to 300,000 pesos. Next. Maltreating and or inflicting other injuries. It is critical, endangered, vulnerable, threatened, other wildlife species with imprisonment of 5 days to 1 year with a fine ranging of 200 to 100,000 pesos. So for the following slides, it will be discussed by my other group mates.
Transporting wildlife or byproducts derivatives. All wildlife derivatives or byproducts and all paraphernalia, tools, and conveyances used shall be ipso facto forfeited in favor of the government. And if the offender and and if the offender is an alien, he shall be deported after service of sentence and payment of fines. Next is conservation and protection of wildlife resources. First, collection of wildlife. The use of appropriate and acceptable wildlife collection techniques. Second, least or no detrimental effects to existing wildlife population and their habitat. And lastly, indigenous people for traditional use, not for trade, and shall not cover threatened species. Next, possession of wildlife. No person or entity must prove financial and technical capability and facility obtained from legal source. Collection and possession of byproducts and derivatives obtained from legal source. And the local transport of wildlife byproducts and derivatives. This shall be authorized unless prejudicial to the wildlife and public health. The exportation and or importation of wildlife. This subjects to strict compliance with law, rules, and regulation. The receipt is technically and financially capable to maintain it. Next.
So for introduction,
Next. Reporter.
reintroduction or restocking of endemic or indigenous wildlife. Only for population enhancement, subject to prior clearance from council, subject to a scientific study and conduct of public consultations. Introduction to exotic wildlife. We need the clearance from the council, not in the protected areas in critical habitats, subject to environmental impact study focusing on bioecology, socioeconomic, and related aspects of the area. Secure consent from local stakeholder. And last, bioprospecting means the research, collection, and utilization of bioecological and genetic resources for purposes of applying the knowledge derived solely for commercial purposes. That's all. Thank you.